Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on the hardest boss fights in Fallout. First up is Legate Lanius. Lanius serves as the final boss of Fallout New Vegas during the Battle of Hoover Dam, and he's designed to punish players who spent 40 hours in the Mojave without investing in speech skills. He has 920 hit points and a damage threshold of 25, which means your standard weapons are dealing approximately nothing to him. He's armed with the Blade of the East, a unique thermal lance variant that deals 95 base damage per swing. In practical terms, he will two-shot you while you're still trying to figure out why your hunting rifle tickles him. The arena is a linear stretch of Hoover Dam with minimal cover, forcing direct confrontation with a man whose name literally means butcher in Latin. He's backed by Praetorian guards and Centurions, who also have high HP and damage threshold. So you're not just fighting one problem, you're fighting an entire firing squad of problems. The game recommends you use an anti-material rifle with armor-piercing rounds. If you don't have one, I don't know what to tell you. Here's the thing, the game gives you a peaceful option. If you have 100 speech, you can talk Lanius into retreating without a fight. This is the game explicitly telling you that dialogue skills matter in an RPG, but apparently you decided that intelligence and charisma were dump stats, so now you're getting deleted by a cosplayer with a glowing stick. Congratulations on your commitment to terrible character builds. The community has well-documented strategies for this fight. If you completed the Gunrunner's Arsenal or Old World Blues DLC, you have access to gear that trivializes him. The LAER, the Elijah's Advanced LAER, the Stealth Suit, Mark II. All of these things make Lanius manageable. Speedrunners either skip him entirely through routing or use the speech check because they understand that fighting him is optional suffering. You chose violence anyway. Lanius is voiced by Mitch Lewis with minimal lines and maximum intimidation. His entire character is a large man with a weapon will kill you now. And yet, despite the game providing multiple solutions to avoid combat, you're here, getting two-shot, wondering why your cowboy repeater isn't working. Truly inspiring. Next up is Frank Horrigan. Frank Horrigan is the final boss of Fallout 2, and he represents what happens when developers in 1998 decided that game balance was a suggestion rather than a requirement. He's a unique super mutant encased in advanced power armor with 999 hit points, which is functionally immortal by the game's standards. His plasma weapons deal 50 to 100 damage per shot. He has ridiculously high damage threshold, and he attacks twice per turn with endgame weapons. You're not fighting a boss, you're fighting the physical manifestation of bad game balance. The encounter takes place on the Enclave oil rig, and Horrigan is backed by Enclave soldiers who are also trying to kill you. The game does provide multiple strategies. You can hack turrets to turn them against the Enclave, convince soldiers to turn on Horrigan, use companions as meat shields, or attempt direct combat with endgame weapons like the Turbo Plasma Rifle, Bozar, or Gauss weapons. If you have none of these things because you didn't save before the fight, you're going to reload a save from 6 hours ago and rethink your life choices. Here's what's extraordinary about this fight. The final boss of a 1998 CRPG is harder than most modern Souls bosses. Horrigan can be killed in one turn if you have an optimal build with critical hits, but without proper preparation, the fight is nearly impossible on your first attempt. He's voiced by Michael Dorn, who played Worf in Star Trek, and his line, "You've gotten a lot farther than you should have, but then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either," is more iconic than it has any right to be given, that he's about to delete your entire party in 2 turns. Horrigan represents the Enclave's super soldier program gone right, which is bad news for you because you're on the receiving end of their success. The community consensus is that you either prepare extensively with the best gear in the game, or you die repeatedly until you understand that this fight doesn't care about your feelings. This is old school CRPG design, where the final boss is allowed to be actually difficult instead of a cinematic formality. If you somehow manage to reach Horrigan without endgame equipment, congratulations on your commitment to suffering. The game assumed you would explore, acquire the best gear, and approach this fight with a plan. You did none of those things, and now you're watching your character get atomized by a character who has more voice lines than combat difficulty justifies. Extraordinary, I know. Moving on to Swan. Swan is a Fallout 4 encounter located in the Boston Common Pond, and he exists to punish players who see a shiny object in the middle of water and think I should investigate that. He's a behemoth-sized super mutant with over 3,000 hit points at higher levels who emerges from the pond when you approach the centerpiece. He uses an anchor as a weapon, which deals massive AoE damage and will one-shot you if you're at the level the game expects you to be when you naturally stumble into this area. The arena is open water with minimal cover, which means you're fighting a giant mutant in his natural habitat, while your pipe pistol does 12 damage per shot. Darwin Award material. Swan is level scaled, but he's always over-leveled relative to when players naturally arrive at Boston Common. The game places this encounter in an area that looks accessible early on, and then punishes you for exploring. It's called environmental storytelling. The environment is telling you to leave. You ignored it, and now you're getting deleted by a mutant with an anchor, while you have 47 hit points and a dream. The community considers Swan the welcome to Boston difficulty check. If you can kill him, you're probably ready for the game's mid to late content. If you can't, you need to leave and come back with better gear. The recommended strategy is to use a Fat Man or explosives, but most players don't have a Fat Man yet because they just left Sanctuary Hills 20 minutes ago. You can cheese him from surrounding buildings, but the fight is designed as a skill check, not a puzzle you solve by standing on a roof. Here's the tragic part. Swan was a man named Edgar Swan, who was turned into a behemoth via FEV experiments. His computer terminal entries are genuinely tragic and provide one of the few moments in Fallout 4 where the writing actually delivers emotional weight. He didn't ask to become a monster. He was experimented on, suffered immensely, and lost his humanity. And then you show up, see a pretty boat, and get immediately killed by him. The game tried to tell a sad story. You weren't paying attention. Speedrunners intentionally trigger Swan early to get his unique drop, the Furious Power Fist, which is one of the best melee weapons in the game. They have optimized routing and gear to handle him. You do not. You have a 10mm pistol and the confidence of someone who hasn't met Swan yet. The fight is technically possible at low levels, but it requires kiting, explosives, and understanding game mechanics. You brought none of these things, so now you're reloading a save and pretending you didn't just get one shot by Shellfish. Next up is the Lieutenant. The Lieutenant is a mini-boss in Fallout 1 who guards the Master's operation at Mariposa military base, and he serves as the game's way of asking, are you ready for endgame content? He's a first-generation super mutant with 238 hit points, high armor class, and damage resistance that makes your standard weapons functionally useless. He's armed with a Gatling laser that deals 12 to 20 damage per burst with multiple shots per turn. The fight occurs in a cramped underground base with poor positioning options, which means you can't kite him and you can't hide. You're locked in a room with a highly intelligent mutant who has a laser minigun. Math isn't your strong suit, apparently. The turn-based system means the Lieutenant gets multiple attacks before you can heal, and if you don't have power armor, a turbo plasma rifle, and a significant supply of stimpaks, you're going to get deleted in 2 turns. First-time players wander into Mariposa at level 8 thinking they can handle it because the game let them walk through the door. The game also lets you walk off cliffs. This is the same principle. Here's the thing. The Lieutenant can be avoided entirely through dialogue if you know about the Master's plans and can articulate them. The game rewards players who explore, gather information, and use intelligence-based dialogue options. But you didn't do that. You saw a military base and thought I should fight everyone inside. So now you're saved scumming for 30 minutes trying to win an unwinnable fight with bad gear, wondering why your hunting rifle isn't working against a super mutant in a game where super mutants are explicitly designed to be bullet resistant. He's called the Lieutenant, not the ensign, not the private, the Lieutenant. Reading comprehension would suggest this is a high-ranking enemy who might be difficult to kill. You ignored this, walked in with 47 HP and a 10mm pistol, and discovered that rank correlates with difficulty. Extraordinary, I know. The Lieutenant is voiced by Tony Jay, the same actor who voices the Master, and he's one of the few super mutants in the franchise who is genuinely intelligent and strategic. His dialogue reveals crucial lore about the Master's plan to transform humanity, and if you actually talk to him instead of immediately opening fire, you learn information that becomes essential for the final confrontation. But talking requires investment in dialogue skills, which you didn't prioritize because you thought Fallout 1 was a shooter. The community considers the Lieutenant a skill check for whether you're ready for endgame content. He can theoretically be one shot with a critical hit plasma rifle build, but this is extremely rare and requires optimal RNG. Many players report this as their first real Fallout difficulty wall, the moment where they realize that wandering into late game areas with early game gear results in immediate death. You are now part of this statistic. Congratulations. Moving on to Ulysses. Ulysses is the final boss of Fallout New Vegas's Lonesome Road DLC, and he represents what happens when developers decide the final confrontation should be 40 minutes of philosophical monologue, followed by a fight on an unstable missile silo platform. He has 800 HP with 18 DT and regenerates health during combat, which means you're not just fighting him, you're fighting a war of attrition against a man dressed in a flag costume who won't stop talking about the old world. He's armed with Old Glory, a unique laser rifle, and various explosives that he will use to delete you in the cramped arena filled with environmental hazards. The fight occurs in phases where Ulysses summons marked men to assist him, creating artificial difficulty by forcing you to deal with multiple threats while he regenerates health and repositions. If you ignored EDE upgrades throughout the DLC, you're experiencing hard mode. If you're a heavy weapon user with the red glare or anti-material rifle, this fight is manageable. If you're trying to use VATS in an arena explicitly designed to punish VATS users, congratulations on your poor strategic decisions. Here's what's genuinely absurd about Ulysses. He has more dialogue than any other Fallout boss, with pages of philosophical debate about identity, history, and the nature of the courier's actions. His entire backstory is tied to things you did before the game even started, specifically your role in activating the Divide's nuclear warheads and destroying his community. The game expects you to engage with this on an intellectual level, and then, after 40 minutes of him monologuing about symbols and bearing the weight of history, you still have to fight him. and you lost. Embarrassing. You can avoid combat entirely if you have speech 100 or follow specific dialogue paths that prove you understand the consequences of your actions. If convinced, Ulysses will stand down and even become a temporary ally, fighting alongside you briefly before parting ways. The community is divided on whether the speech check ruins the fight or improves it. Some players want the challenge of combat. Others appreciate that the DLC's themes are resolved through dialogue rather than violence. You didn't have speech 100, so this philosophical debate is irrelevant to you. Lonesome Road is designed as level 40 plus content, but it's accessible much earlier if you're confident in your build. The Divide is filled with Deathclaws, Marked Men, and Tunnelers, all of which serve as warnings that you're not ready for this content yet. You ignored those warnings, walked the Divide for 4 hours, got philosophy lectured by a man in an old world flag, and then got blown up by your own explosives in a cramped arena because you don't understand splash damage. The Marked Men interruptions create artificial difficulty by breaking the flow of combat, forcing you to shift focus while Ulysses heals and repositions. This is intentional design to prevent you from simply face-tanking him with stimpaks. It requires tactical thinking, positioning, and resource management. You brought none of these things, so now you're reloading and wondering why the DLC is so hard. It's not. You're just unprepared. Next up is Kellogg. Kellogg is Fallout 4's Fort Hagen showdown, and he's the main story's way of informing you that settlement building doesn't translate to combat effectiveness. He has 2,140 HP with exceptional damage resistance and AP refresh implants from cybernetic enhancements that make him functionally immortal. He's armed with Kellogg's pistol, a .44 Magnum doing 48 base damage, and he uses stealth boys to become invisible during combat phases. You have a leather chest piece and optimism. The math is not in your favor. The fight occurs in Fort Hagen's cramped interior with multiple levels and choke points, and Kellogg is backed by synths, a mix of Gen 1 and Gen 2 units providing covering fire. The synths respawn during the fight if you don't kill them quickly enough, which means you're dealing with constant pressure while trying to track down an invisible 108-year-old man with implants that give him ridiculous durability and VATS accuracy. This is a main story mandatory fight with no speech options, which means the game that usually provides multiple solutions has decided you're going to solve this one with violence. Naturally, you're underleveled and under-equipped because you followed the main quest. That's your first mistake. Here's what makes this fight particularly brutal for certain builds. Stealth players discover that their entire strategy doesn't work when the boss can also go invisible. You invested 15 perk points into Sneak and Ninja, thinking you'd ghost through the game. Kellogg has stealth boys and doesn't care about your build. He'll vanish, reposition, and shoot you in the back while you're frantically searching for him with your limited VATS range. Meanwhile, the synths are providing covering fire from elevated positions, and you're trapped in a facility with minimal escape routes. Kellogg is a cybernetically enhanced pre-war human whose lifespan has been extended via implants. He killed the sole survivor's spouse and kidnapped their infant son, Sean, at the start of the game, which makes this fight emotionally significant from a narrative perspective. The Memory Den sequence before the fight provides his entire backstory, a tragic tale of loss, mercenary work, and becoming the Institute's enforcer. The game wants you to understand him as a character. Then it wants you to kill him in a cramped bunker while he's invisible, and you're out of stimpaks. His pistol is one of the best weapons in Fallout 4, featuring a legendary effect that refills your AP on critical hits. The community considers this the first real boss fight in the game, the moment where Fallout 4 stops being an exploration sandbox and becomes a mandatory combat encounter. Voice acted by Keith Farley with extensive dialogue in the memory sequence, Kellogg is one of the few Fallout 4 characters with actual depth. And then you fight him in a hallway and get two-shot because you spent your perk points on Scrapper and Local Leader instead of combat effectiveness. The fight has no pacifist options despite Fallout 4's usual flexibility in quest design. You can't talk him down. You can't sneak past him. You can't hack a terminal to resolve this diplomatically. The game forces direct confrontation, and if you're not prepared with heavy weapons, power armor, and a significant supply of healing items, you're going to reload this fight multiple times. Players who invested in settlement building discover that their elaborate supply lines don't help when a cyborg mercenary is hunting them through Fort Hagen's corridors. Truly inspiring. Moving on to the Mirelurk Queen. The Mirelurk Queen in Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC has between 3,500 and 5,000 hit points depending on level scaling, which caps at level 100, and she exists to punish players who think a laser rifle is an appropriate weapon choice against armored enemies. She has high damage resistance to energy weapons and is vulnerable to explosives. Information the loading screen explicitly told you before you entered Far Harbor. You brought a laser rifle anyway. Reading is fundamental. Her primary ranged attack is Acid Spit that deals over 75 damage with AoE Splash and a poison damage overtime effect. that persists after the fight ends unless you use Rad-X. The acid spit can hit you behind cover due to splash mechanics, which means your strategy of hiding behind a rock while she slowly kills you is not working. She also has a melee stomp attack that staggers and deals massive damage if you're foolish enough to fight her at close range. On top of that, she continuously spawns Mirelurk, hatchlings, and soft shells during the fight. These spawns are infinite until the queen dies, which is an intentional resource drain designed to make you waste ammunition on baby crabs, while the mother regenerates and snipes you with acid from across the battlefield. Far Harbor queens are notably tougher than their Commonwealth variants, and they often appear in open areas with water, which is their natural advantage. You're fighting a giant crab in her preferred habitat, while she has numerical superiority, ranged attacks, and more HP than most named characters in the game. Somehow, you're losing to Shellfish. Extraordinary, I know. The fight forces constant retreating and repositioning because standing still means getting swarmed by hatchlings while taking acid damage from the queen. If you panic and waste all your ammunition on the infinitely respawning ads instead of focusing on the queen, you'll run out of resources and die. This is a prioritization test. You failed it. The community recommends level 40 or higher with heavy weapons before engaging Mirelurk queens in Far Harbor. Fatman and missile launcher users trivialize the fight because explosives bypass her armor. You don't have explosives because you didn't read the loading screen, so now you're reloading a save and reconsidering your life choices. Here's where it gets worse. Mirelurk queens can sometimes spawn alongside fog crawlers, creating nightmare scenarios where you're fighting two of Far Harbor's most dangerous enemies simultaneously. The queen appears in several Far Harbor quests, making her unavoidable if you want to progress the DLC's story. You can't skip her. You can't talk your way out. You have to fight a creature with 5,000 hit points while infinite baby crabs swarm you and acid melts your armor. Far Harbor is a horror DLC. The horror is that you thought you were prepared. The poison DOT persists after the fight, continuously draining your HP even after you've killed the queen. If you don't have Rad-X or antibiotics, you'll watch your health bar slowly deplete while you search for a doctor or wait for the effect to expire. This is the game reminding you that winning the fight doesn't mean you survived the encounter. You're standing in the aftermath, poisoned, out of stimpaks, and wondering why you didn't bring explosives like the loading screen suggested. I don't know what to tell you. The game provided instructions. You ignored them. And now we arrive at the Master. The Master is Fallout 1's true final boss, and he represents the ultimate. Did you pay attention? Check in RPG history. He's not a traditional combat encounter. He's a hybrid of dialogue skill check and impossible fight, which means if you spec'd into big guns and ignored intelligence, you're about to discover that you fundamentally misunderstood what game you've been playing for the past 40 hours. The Master has 500 hit points with the best armor in the game and regenerates constantly. He attacks with psychic powers and physical attacks simultaneously. He's fused with the Cathedral's computer systems, making him functionally omniscient in his domain. You have 47 hit points and a hunting rifle you've been using since Junktown. How's that working out? The combat route is theoretically possible with absolute perfect build, gear, and luck, but almost no one defeats the Master through direct combat because it's practically suicidal. The intended solution is a speech check that requires 100% speech skill, discovering his plan's fatal flaw, that super mutants are sterile and cannot reproduce, and presenting evidence in the form of Vrie's autopsy report or a holodisc from the Mariposa military base. The game requires detective work, biological understanding, and rhetorical skills to defeat the final boss. You chose to punch things. Bold strategy. Here's where players discover they've been playing Fallout wrong the entire time. You need to have explored the world, talked to NPCs, gathered evidence, and invested in non-combat skills to resolve the final confrontation peacefully. If you sold Vrie's autopsy report for 50 caps because you needed ammunition, you're now reloading a save from 6 hours ago. If you never found the autopsy report because you ignored the Brotherhood of Steel questline, you're reloading a save from even further back. If you don't have 100% speech skill because you dumped charisma and never tagged speech, you can't convince the Master his plan is doomed even if you have the evidence. The game tested whether you understood that Fallout is a role-playing game, not a shooter. You failed. The Master is actually named Richard Gray, and his pre-transformation backstory is documented in computer logs throughout Mariposa military base. He was a scientist who fell into an FEAVI vat and merged with the base's biological experiments, emerging as a grotesque fusion of flesh, technology, and multiple consciousness streams. He's voiced by Tony Jay, the same actor who voiced the Lieutenant, and his dialogue is some of the most memorable villain writing in RPG history. He engages in philosophical debate about the future of humanity, arguing that super mutants represent evolution and unity, while humans represent chaos and self-destruction. And then you have to prove to him that his master race is sterile, and his entire plan is biologically impossible. The self-destruct nuke option requires finding and inputting the correct code, which destroys the cathedral and kills the Master. His death speech is different based on how you defeat him. Combat versus dialogue versus nuclear detonation. and each ending provides different insight into his character. If you convince him through dialogue, he expresses genuine despair at the failure of his vision. If you nuke the base, he dies cursing your name. The game rewards players who engage with its narrative complexity. Failure means actual game over. The Master's army conquers the wasteland, and you get an ending slideshow showing the extinction of humanity. This is not a fake out. This is the game telling you that your actions have consequences, and choosing to fight a psychic regenerating wall of flesh instead of engaging with the RPG mechanics results in the apocalypse winning. Speedrunners use explosive timing and optimal pathing to skip most of the encounter setup, but they still need either the speech check or the self-destruct code. There is no brute force solution. The community considers the Master the intellectual challenge that defines classic Fallout, a final boss that tests whether you understood the game's design philosophy. In conclusion, Fallout bosses are designed to punish poor preparation and reward system mastery, and you should absolutely play them. If you enjoyed this, check out the hardest quests in Fallout. Peace on planet Earth.